So welcome. Thank you for joining us, everyone. And I'm really pleased to have our guest trainer today, YouthActionNet alum Reese Fernandez-Ruiz, who is president and co-founder of Rags2Riches in the Philippines, which is a social enterprise that empowers Philippine-based artisans to create eco-ethical fashion, right? Eco-ethical fashion and home products, and work on poverty alleviation as well. And Reese joined our YouthActionNet community in 2008 and has been a superstar fellow and is going to be leading us through a workshop on using spreadsheets for daily cash flow management, some tips and tools to help manage social ventures during this crisis. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Reese and go ahead and take it away.
Hello. So thank you so much, Jessie, and thanks so much to my YouthActionNet family for setting this up. YouthActionNet is actually my first fellowship ever. So we started our company 2008, and I got the fellowship in 2008. So it was a few months into starting Rags2Riches. So I'm super thankful for this community. It has been a constant of mine for the past 12 years. It's just really daunting to say 12 years. I feel a little old, but I feel older now, like 5 years older since the start of the pandemic. I know a lot of people who are listening right now probably are feeling all sorts of emotions. Sometimes you're hopeful, sometimes you're inspired, other times you're anxious, and I've been feeling the same. I think we're all in different roller coasters in the same very sad theme park, but we're still all in this together. So I decided a few weeks ago to spend a little bit of my time to also teach the different skills that I could to people who may be needing it at this time. So cash flow planning is one of the things that I'm passionate about. I know it's weird to say you're passionate about cash flow planning and spreadsheets, but it is real. It is a passion. So I'd like to share it with all of you because I think it's very useful, especially during these very uncertain times. So when things are uncertain, you'd want a little bit of certainty on some areas of your life, and this is how you can achieve it in some way. But before I start, let me just share my screen. Can you see my screen? I'm wondering what you can see. Hold on.
I can see a very nice looking spreadsheet.
Really? Oh, okay. Can you see the sort of a slideshow?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So daily cash flow planning using spreadsheets, and I have a tagline of because what you don't know can hurt you. So I really, really believe this, and I think if we avoid knowing our numbers, we'll get into a lot of trouble in the future. And as creatives, as entrepreneurs, as social entrepreneurs, and as nonprofit leaders, sometimes it's very daunting to look at numbers. For a long time, I remember profit was such a difficult word to say for a lot of people, for a lot of social entrepreneurs. And so numbers are also not as comfortable. But in this situation, I think we all need to face our numbers and see what we could do with them. But before we start, I just want to also say that I'm no way a super expert in this. I just have a lot of painful experiences. So in a way, I have the best teachers because you know what they say about experiences being the best teachers. I have the best ones because they're the most painful. My tips and tools are more practical than technical. So this will not be accounting 101 because accounting 101 would need a few more hours to do, which we don't have. So I want this to be as practical and actionable as possible. So my goal is that you can do this right after the workshop without any accounting background because it's very, very basic. This does not replace your accounting software. If any of you are using current accounting softwares, this will not replace it. Your accounting software tells you what happened, and this template will try to show you the future. And lastly, yes, you do need to learn how to work with spreadsheets. For the purposes of this workshop, I'm going to skip the basic spreadsheet part because I'm going to assume that a lot of you who will be listening to this are more or less familiar with spreadsheets, whether Excel file, Google Sheets, or whatever you use. But if you do need some Excel sheet or spreadsheet basic support or refresher, I also added a sheet here called Spreadsheet Basics so that you could go through it on your own and just try to read through the instructions and try it out for yourselves. I hope that's okay because we only have limited time and I'd want to really go to the meat of the template. So what you learned today, one is principles of daily cash planning. And again, this is based on my experience. We've been around as a company for the past 12 years, but I've only been doing this religiously for the past 4 years. So there's like a good chunk of years there where I was also in the position where a lot of you probably are right now. So I just want to say it's not too late as long as you do it right away and intentionally. Spreadsheet basics, again, we're not going to go through that. I hope you could go through it on your own. And then daily cash flow planning template is what I'm going to share more of, and then best practices. Okay, so for the principles, my number one is you could be profitable but have no cash. So don't just aim for profitability, aim for cash. What do I mean by this? So some of you who are familiar with how an income statement works. So an income statement is basically your snapshot of what you sold or your revenues and what your expenses are and what is left after you deduct your expenses from your revenues. So what does that mean? So for example, if you're a nonprofit and you have, let's say, a grant, so that's sort of a revenue, a grant or a donation from a third party. And then you have your expenses, you have your salaries, you have your office supplies, you have everything that you need to operate. You deduct that, and whatever is left is your profitability or your surplus that you could use for to reinvest in what you do, or you could use for growing your organization. But here, I just want to emphasize that it is possible to be profitable but have no cash because you count your revenue when it is promised or when it is delivered, not when it is converted to cash. So for example, in our case in Rags2Riches, we sell products that artisans make. So when we sell products, that's considered a sale. But sometimes we sell to, let's say, a big company, and then the company would have payment terms. They would pay us in 30 days. So even if that's already a revenue for us, and that is already considered part of our income statement, and we see that we are profitable, that doesn't mean that the cash is already with us because it's going to still be paid in 30 days. So it's very critical to know the difference and to know that just because you're profitable, it doesn't mean you're safe. So cash is still the key here. Cash is still king. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of cash is king. In any organization, in any business, or in any household, this remains true. And when I say cash, I don't mean just like physical cash. I mean cash in your bank, cash in your digital wallets that you could easily access and use to pay for goods and services. Number two, principle of daily cash planning. So this is the formula, the very simple formula of any cash planning. So your beginning cash plus your cash inflow for the day less your cash outflow for the day is your ending cash position. So every single day I have a tracker, and that's the one I'm going to show you today, of my beginning cash, my projected inflow for the day, projected outflow for the day, and then my expected ending cash position. So your ending cash position, so at the end of the day, you have your remaining cash. That is your beginning cash for tomorrow. So very simple for now, but I will show you the template that sort of puts it all together. Number three, Consistency is better than perfection. So project your daily cash position for as long as you can stretch it, but monitor every single day. I think some of us, when we get discouraged because we weren't able to do something perfectly, some of us just abandon it and say, I'm not just going to do that because I can't be super good at it. But in this case, consistency really, really is better than perfection. Not just in this case, but in a lot of cases. It's better to just get back on it than abandon it completely, because that will hurt you more. So for example, when I first started doing the daily cash planning, sometimes I would forget. Like there were days when I would just completely ignore it. And then when I go back to it, it looks unfamiliar. And I'm like, oh no, how do I get back on it again? But I get back on it still. And now I could do it every single day and not miss any day and not feel anxious anymore looking at it, because I know what to expect. So be consistent rather than perfect. And another principle of daily cash planning gets a little bit technical, but I will try to make it as simple as I could. So in every company, you have what you call assets and liabilities. So assets, that's your money, your receivables, your equipment, and other things that you can convert to cash or you can convert to money. Your liabilities are your loans and payables. So your liabilities are mostly goods and services that you already got as a company, but you haven't paid for yet. Or it could also be loans that you receive from banks or from like deferred rent from your landlord that you haven't paid for yet, but you will in the future. So those are your liabilities. In daily cash planning, the goal is to convert assets to cash as quickly as possible. So that means if you have inventory, convert that to cash immediately. If you have receivables, meaning people owe you money for goods and services that you have provided, get that to be cash as quickly as possible. And second is negotiate payment terms for your liabilities. So what does this mean? If you have big loans or payables for rent from landlords or what have you, try to have as long as possible payment terms that they can afford. But of course, do pay them as much as you can. But the goal is not to avoid them, but to try to make them as long as possible, especially during this very challenging time when cash is depleting quickly, more than cash coming in. So I'm not going to go through the spreadsheet basics because they're really, really basic. It's basically, well, I've been saying basic for so many times, but you could see it here in the sheet. So you could study that on your own. It's really simple. It takes a little bit of bravery and a lot of patience to go through this, but you can do it. Okay. I'll just go to the template directly. About the template, I'm going to send Jessie the links to this template and to this presentation so that you could study it on your own as well. One principle is that you can tweak it according to what works for you. So it's not, I'm not going to check this. I'm not your teacher. This is not your thesis. You don't have to make this and I'm going to check if it's correct. This is for you. So it's super practical. Tweak it according to what works for you. And it's on Google Sheets. You don't need edit access, just download it. So I'm going to show you how. This is how it looks like, the daily cash monitoring template. And you go to File, which is this little button below. And then you go to Download, and you download as Microsoft Excel. You do not need edit access. Do not ask me for edit access, because if you edit this, everybody can see your cash flow planning. Everybody with a link, which is like more than 2,000 people. So yes, you don't want that. Okay, so let's proceed. I'll go to that later, but for now, let's look at the different parts of this whole file. There's a very important, which just basically tells me, do not ask me for edit access. It just gives you instructions of what to do to download it. Legend is just so that you could identify the cells. So if the cell, so these are called cells, each box. If the cell is yellow with blue font, that's an input. That means that you write on it. And if it's black, that is the result, or a result of a formula. So I have the spreadsheet basics here. And then there's the daily cash planning dynamic. I put dynamic because it's really going to change every day as you work on it. There's a sheet called projected outflow, which I pre-filled with some stuff. That's in pesos, by the way, so don't panic. So I'm just going to use the same numbers anyway. And then there's projected inflow tab, and then there's a reference tab. You don't need to go through it right now, but it's just for reference. So let's go to the projected outflow sheet first. So I'm going to walk you through it. Each column has a header. So here, column A is category. Column B is the details. So the category is just basically the general basket or the general term you want to use for a specific outflow. So what are your outflows? It's usually your expenses, the things that you have to pay. Details, amount, date due. So the date due is, well, when they're due. And then there's a priority. The priority depends on you. So you're the only one who can say what your priorities are. I put a drop-down box here. I just used data validation, which again is in my basic spreadsheet guide. You could choose if it's a top priority, high, mid, or low. Target date is different from date due because during these days, when life is very uncertain, there are some days when you can't make your due date for your payables. So your target date is your target date, like when you plan to pay a specific payable or a specific expense. And then projected outflow status is just a guide for you if it's already disbursed or if it's scheduled or if it's canceled. And then you could also put a date disbursed, basically when you were able to pay for that specific amount. So this is just pre-filled with some categories and details. So payroll, for a lot of our entrepreneurs out there, payroll is one of the things that we're very proud of, but we're also very nervous about every payroll day. So I pre-filled it up to June 15. In the Philippines, we get our salaries every 15th and 30th of the month. I don't know if it's the same in all countries, but it's usually split in two. So there. And I place it as a top priority because people is always top priority for us. And I know for a lot of you as well. So I just pre-filled it. And then there's rent. There's rent of the office and there's rent of a store. So these numbers are not real numbers. I just put them there so that we have something to play with. Okay. So I just wanna check in quickly if there are any questions at this point, or if there's something that's unclear. Oh, you may be wondering what this yellow thing here is. I just made a sum of the whole column C, just so I know how much payables I have in total, just to make me nervous. Yeah, so a lot of organizations will have a long list of this. So it could go until the end of whatever is possible in Google Sheets. And that's fine. It's a lot of work to do this in the beginning, but when you get a hang of it, it's really helpful. So if you notice, the first row freezes when I scroll down, and that is very helpful, because especially if you're going to have a long list of outflows. So how you do that is pretty simple. You select the first row, and then you do view, freeze up to current row, so that you freeze the first row and it doesn't move even when you scroll down to the ends of Google Sheets. Okay, so projected outflow planning, that is the sheet that I just showed you, but the principles there are the following. One, list down all of your projected outflow that are necessary. Your salaries, your payments to suppliers, your rent. All of us, no matter what industry we are in, we all have outflows. We all have expenses. Two, identify your priorities. Three, fill up the due dates. Four, sort according to due dates and priorities. I'm going to show you that in a bit. And then five, input each of these in your cash planning, daily cash planning dynamic sheet, which is this one. So I pre-filled that here at the bottom, so you could see there. Outflow category, payroll sales, payroll production, rent, and office. So I filled that up based on what is here. Yeah? Okay. So how do you sort it? This is already sorted because I played with it the last time. But basically, you select the first row, and then you see this funnel-like icon here. You just press that so that you could create a filter. And when you create a filter, you can now sort your priorities, like sort your priorities quite literally on spreadsheets after you have sorted them in your life. You could do sort A to Z, which will sort it from top one priority to the third or to the fourth, whichever. You could also do sort your target date from A to Z, which will show you what is due right away to what is due like a few months to go. So if this is super long and you just input everything, that's fine because you could sort it later. So you don't have to like look at all of your receipts and do it by date. So you could just type it all down and then sort it later. So it saves you a lot of time. Okay, so now that I have inputted that here in the outflow category, I have also plotted out the numbers. So you can see there's 100,000 for payroll for sales, 120,000 for payroll of production, and it recurs every 15th and 30th of the month. But I didn't project it so far for this exercise, but you could do that on your own. So I pre-filled that here as well. So this May 15, there's 100,000, 120,000. Again, this is in pesos. So not going to change that for purposes of this so that you could just see how it works. So I pre-filled that. It's all there. Ta-da! Okay, and now let's go to projected inflow, which is my favorite sheet, and it will be yours too. So projected inflow looks similar, but is different because they are the accounts that you are expecting as inflow in your company or in your nonprofit. Category is just, again, the main basket or main theme or category or main name that you have for the specific receivable or the specific inflow. And then the details would just be company A or company B, the name of the organization that you are expecting a grant from, the name of a partner or whatever it is, as long as you can track it, the amount, the date due, the priority. The priority is, again, your guide of what to follow up with the most. So you're like, okay, this is 200,000. I will make that my top priority to follow that up. Because some of us have so many receivables, it's tough to know which ones we should follow up first. But if you prioritize it early on, then you know the action points that you could do after. The likelihood is also very important, but again, this is dependent on you and your evaluation and your partnership with your customer or your funder. So you could put highly likely if they're highly likely to pay. Not likely is sad, but it happens. And then there's just likely, so you don't know, but you could just put it there for your own guidance. And then date expected is different from date due, because date due is when they promise that they could pay you, but date expected is when you really think they can pay you, which is different, especially during this very difficult time for everyone when cash is very tight. You have to make your own estimates just for your own cash flow planning. And then I inputted all of these as well here in the daily cash planning dynamic, here in the area where I placed for it. It's inflow category. And again, I also pre-filled it so that you could see how that looks like. Where is company B? Yeah, it seems like I deleted something, but let's put that back in. Company B is 100,000 August 10. Great. 100,000 August 10. Oh, that's because it's way here in August. Oh, it's there. Okay, so there. So it's possible that they could pay you like in a long, long time from now, because such is life these days. Okay, so now that I filled that up, I filled up the inflow category, I filled up the outflow category. This whole sheet summarizes everything. So here you could see that total inflow for the day is just summed up from, like, summing up this whole section where inflow category is for that day. You could see I placed an instruction here, insert row above this row, so that when you add more, just do it like this. Right click and then insert one above. And then you could do that over and over again so that you could have a lot of inflow categories. You could also do the same for outflow categories. So remember the formula that I taught from the beginning? Your beginning cash balance plus your inflow minus your outflow is equal to your ending cash balance. So I place it all on top here, so you could see it in rows 3 to 5. So row 3 is your projected or actual beginning balance. So I put a slash there because you could hard code it with whatever your actual beginning balance is, and it will correct the rest of your file. So let us say that your beginning cash balance for May 1 was 50,000. So you see that it automatically fills up everything until the end of the year. So that's how long I projected this sheet for. But you can even extend it further if you want. So in Rags2Riches, I have a similar file, and it is projected until 2021. So just for fun, but also right now it's super important to see how long you're gonna survive with the cash and receivables that you have, so that you could find ways right now to mitigate future difficulties and challenges. So let me show you what I mean. So here you could see row 4. Row 4 is the most important row in this sheet because it is your guide. It shows you your projected ending balance for that day. So this is I already inputted formula here. So I'm just going to show you how I got that. That's projected actual beginning balance. So that's W3 plus W17, which is the total inflow, minus W29, which is the total outflow, is equal to your projected ending balance. And it automatically turns green if it is above 1, if it's more than 0. But if it's below 0, meaning you will have negative cash, it's going to turn red. So I used conditional formatting to do that. And again, that is here in Spreadsheet Basics, right here, conditional formatting. So it's one of my favorite features in spreadsheets because I'm very visual. So I like things that just automatically light up to be red or green to make me nervous or make me happy. So it depends on the kind of emotion that's called for. So, okay, so you could see that I placed 50,000 as your beginning cash balance, and I also inputted all of the inflows and all of the outflows. And so we could now scroll to the right and see at what point our cash balance is going to turn red. Uh-oh. So that means on May 15, we won't be able to support our payroll anymore based on this. And this is just assuming that you don't have any inflow from sales at all. And you still have a lot of things to pay for. So when I see this in my own spreadsheet, I get really nervous. But at the same time, I look at what I have going on for me. So in this case, you could see that you're expecting company A to pay you $200,000 on May 18. So if you see this already, and let's say right now it's just May 1. If you see this, and you see that you have a receivable of $200,000 on May 18, you could call company A and ask them if they could give you this $200,000 before you hit red. So let's say, can I please get it on Wednesday, May 13? So you could do that. Let's say they said yes. Ta-da! Green. So yeah, that's my favorite color. If they say yes. If they didn't say yes and you're still red, then you could go down in your outflow category and you could see which ones could be in installment. You could pay an installment so that you will still have some cash. Because if you're totally negative, then that is really, really dangerous. Try not to get negative in your cash, in your projected ending balance here in this exercise at all, because that's when you know that you cannot afford to pay for any of your payables anymore. So I do this for all of our receivables. I also put a simulation of sales just in case, like I'm gonna put a few thousands here. And that's what I'm going to tell my team that their target is for the week of cash receivables. And then I also put all of the outflow categories possible or imaginable. And I projected out for about 18 months. So yeah, if you could stretch it for as long as you can, do that. But every single day, visit this sheet, as difficult as it may be, and as not fun as it is in the beginning. Do it for your sake and for the sake of your organization. So I do this. I go to this file, and then let's say I forgot to update it for a few days. That's fine. So I'm just going to update my actual beginning balance. Let's say the actual beginning balance is 80,000 now because I got some inflow that I didn't expect, but it's there. So I'm just going to put that there, and I'm just going to hide the past there, and then it's updated. So I do this because this sheet is again not for perfection, but just so it can help you decide for the future. So that is the projected inflow planning. Okay, so for the best practices, one is hope for the best, of course. I think we all are fellows of YouthActionNet because we are optimistic people who want to create some positive change in the world. But at the same time, plan for the worst. It's a good mental exercise to see what will happen if this didn't pay, if this didn't come in, if this doesn't happen. Because it's a mental exercise. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it means that you know the scenario of when or if it happens, and you can think of ways to mitigate it, and you can think of ways to find ways to still make your company or your organization survive. Project and plan your cash flow with a 1-month view at least, but I suggest you could do it even more. Evaluate your most liquid assets. So what are liquid assets? Those are the assets that are the easiest to transform to cash. So cash is your most liquid assets, but after that is probably your receivables, your inventory. Only if you are selling essentials right now, or grocery items, then it's a very liquid asset. Plan to liquidate them as soon as possible. Prioritize, and I know I don't have to say this, especially to this group, but I always like emphasizing that we put people first and everything else follows. As entrepreneurs and as leaders of organizations, a lot of people depend on our partnership with them. So if it's difficult for us, imagine how much more difficult it is if you're somebody's taking care of your family and you don't know where to get your paycheck next. And then try not to die as a company or as an organization during this time. Try to keep yourself afloat as much as possible. Try to be as digital as possible. I know it really depends on what country you're from, but in the Philippines, this has been a challenge. This digital transformation is brought to us by COVID-19, but at least we're like getting there faster. And it's so important because in daily cash flow planning, you have to know your cash balance almost at a daily basis, which is hard to do if you don't have access to your bank account via digital means. Last is in cash flow management and planning, timing is crucial. As I illustrated here, if only company A gives you their cash earlier than May 18, then you wouldn't be in the red. So timing is everything. Timing is crucial. And lastly, make it a habit. Monitor daily, beginning of the day and end of the day. So I do this every day. I mean, I do fun stuff too, but I do this every day because it's so important to be on top of our numbers. And cash flow is just so crucial that if you don't know what's happening with your cash, you also don't know your lifeline and how long you could survive. And as leaders, it's a responsibility to be able to know this, understand it, and decide based on numbers. And that's it. Do you have any questions? Am I too fast? Am I talking too fast? And anyway, this is recorded, right? So you could you could pause it.
Awesome. Thank you, Reese. This is a great opportunity if anybody has questions for Reese, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or you can type in the group chat as well. And I'm checking the group chat. So Daniela said it was very clear. Thank you. And yes, that was super clear. Practice. I'm curious if anyone who has joined us has any other tips that they want to share or challenges that they want to pose or talk through with Reese and others.
Yeah, that'll be great. Oh, let me stop sharing. There.
So we have, Ignacio, go ahead.
Oh my gosh,
no, go ahead. Thanks so much. That was pretty cool, actually. You're doing things that I haven't been doing in terms of measuring it daily. I started so recently that for us, we're a very small team, and our planning right now, we haven't got a lot of income, so we've been doing it. We started doing it monthly, and then we started breaking up by weeks, but we're still not in a place where we have so much cash flow where we need to measure by day. So this is pretty cool to have a tool available that's we're able to do. One of the things that I've been measuring a lot since the beginning are, I don't know if this isn't it's not on the cash flow report, but it's called the burn rate and the runway. I don't know if you measure that in some other place, but I think it's very valuable for the situation. I mean, for the virus to be able to plan ahead, not only to be able to see when you're going to go on red, but also like be able to project and plan ahead in time when you need to make maybe cuts in terms of supplies or something, where you need. So both those concepts are pretty important, I think, for us. So if you do know about them, maybe just mentioning it them, or yeah, you seem to be nodding. So yeah.
Yeah, this is actually measuring your burn rate in days. So rather than months. So you could look at like how many days you're going to live. Because burn rate is, right? So you have like cash in the beginning, and then you want to know how fast you're going to burn through that cash. Um, it's painful to track it sometimes. So we've done a lot of burns ourselves for some years. I mean, we're quite lucky now that that's not the case, although this pandemic is really just changing the game for a lot of people. So we don't know. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, both of those concepts I think are also really helpful, and particularly if you're trying to zoom out a little bit to get that bigger picture, right? So if you have a sense of your inflows and outflows for a quarter or a year, and you're looking at how are your actual projected, especially looking at your projected outflows, how do they stack up over like a more extended period of time? That gives you, that burn rate tells you if if you're going too fast or too slow. And probably not a lot of people are dealing with the too slow problem, but you might be. In some cases, you might be actually having a problem if you have, especially, let's say, donor funding for activities that you cannot complete right now, then you may be moving too slow with that burn rate. So that's a useful thing to see that bigger picture as well. But I will admit that I don't understand very much about the concept of runway. Amy, maybe can you talk a little bit more about that one?
So I think in a very basic sense, it's basically how long you're gonna live. So that's your runway, the whole runway of whatever cash you have. So it's usually used in by investors, and I've heard it a lot in tech companies, like your runway and your burn rate. So your burn rate is how fast you burn through your runway, basically. Your runway is how long you have until you need to raise funds again. I'm not a fan of burning through whatever cash you have and not generating your own revenue. But I do realize that there are some organizations with that kind of model. And there are a lot of organizations that rely on that because it's really tough to have a business model around social causes, if we're very, very honest about it now. In Rags2Riches, we're lucky because we have products, and that's why we can say, oh, you could just have sales for a few days and then you extend your runway by a few more days. But for others, the runway is the only thing that they have, no inflow at all. So that's very dangerous, but at the same time, I know that that is a reality for some people. Like, if you have any any other way of explaining it, Ini, maybe.
Well, the way we use it, maybe I need to check back on how we're dealing with it, but we also take into account the money that's going in. So basically, the runway is just the money that you have, dividing it by what you usually spend on the period that you're measuring. In our case, we're measuring by months. So say you have 1,000 and you're spending monthly 100. That pretty much tells you that you have 10 months left of money to spend. And that gives you an idea. If it's 2 months, then you're pretty much in a rush. If you have 1 year, you sort of understand pretty much. But then you can also plan that ahead in the months that are coming ahead in time. So if you're also expecting to have a lot of income or outcome, those will also be taken into account. Maybe you can plan, and then you know that you're paying your rent. You pay your rent yearly, and then you're going to have a big payment coming out in a few months, but then you also have a grant coming in. So the runway is just one more of those metrics that just helps you understand in perspective how much you'll have left in that period. So in the daily one, you know that you're going to run out of money, but then this one just tells you, look, you're okay for X amount of months or X amount of quarters, or at least a quarter or two. So that's a way we're using it to know if we're getting close to a point where we definitely need to cut down on costs or find a way to earn more money. And I think it's helpful in the terms of months. looking in the pandemic, because we know that this is going to be lasting for many months, and maybe we have companies or social enterprises that are dependent on seasons. So maybe it has to do with tourism, or it has to do with I don't know. So maybe planning ahead and knowing that what's going to be happening in December or in July or in September, it might be very useful to know that you have enough money to last until that moment where you know that a lot of money is going to be maybe coming in. Or maybe you're planning, look, quarantine in my country is going to last for at least another 3-4 months. So do I have enough money for 3 or 4 months until I reach, again, be able to sell?
So that just reminded me, actually, because we use this cash flow planning template for our committee meetings every week. So what I do is I plot all of the outflows that are projected for 18 months and the inflows that are projected for 18 months. And then I tell people, if we don't generate sales at all, for example, and we just rely on the inflows that are from past sales or from funders, let's say, and then all of the outflows, then our cash is good only until this exact date. So I know exactly what date we're going to run out of cash. That's because it's a daily thing. So I could tell them, okay, so if we don't have any inflow, we're only until August 13, 2021 or something like that, which is actually pretty good if it's 2021. Good job for anybody who has like cash flow up to that time. But yeah, so it just gives us a date. And then when we're like really close to that date, I just update it again and say, okay, it has extended. Or, oh no, we're gonna have to tighten our belts because our cash out date is gonna be this date. So it's very concrete because it has a date. But at the same time, it could be a lot of hard work to put it together since it's an everyday thing. But you could do it on a monthly basis and just get like a similar result, just probably not with the exact date for your cash out. But yeah, it would definitely help if you know these numbers.
So if anybody else in the group has questions, please feel free to either add them in the chat box or unmute and ask them out loud. I do have one question for either of you who are currently on camera, and that's either from your own experience currently or from talking to other social entrepreneurs in particular, but kind of any people who are running smaller or medium enterprises. Curious, what are some of the key decisions that people are making using a tool like a spreadsheet that's monitoring daily cash flow? Like, what are some of the trade-offs and some of the considerations? I mean, Reese, you mentioned the importance of, or the opportunities to, with that daily management, look at if you're expecting, if you're expecting a payment on a certain date and you realize you're going to be in the red, prioritize reaching out and trying to get that payment earlier. You also talked about the outflows and trying to schedule the payment terms out as long as possible. But I'm curious if you're encountering any other things that you're seeing in terms of big, difficult decisions people are making with trade-offs or other tips for kind of how to navigate trying to get back into the green.
Yeah, so I've done most of those. I couldn't count how many calls I've already made because I've seen that in the next few weeks we're going to be in the red if we don't get a collection sooner. So I have made so many calls because I've seen it turn red and I'm like, oh no, I should call the people who owe us money, and then they're able to pay way earlier because I've been so persistent. And I would explain as well that during this point in time, we're going to make some payments as well to our suppliers or to our artisans. And a lot of people understand that as long as it's explained well. And I also know how to explain it because I see it happening in my daily cash flow planning. I've also used it to explain to suppliers, for example, if we need a few more days before we could pay, or even some team members, if just in case we need a day or two for salaries to be deposited. So we've never missed salary in 12 years. But at the same time, we've had like maybe 2 times when we had to delay for a day. It's that tight. So there were times when it's that tight, and it really helped that we knew it ahead of time so that we could tell people way ahead of time as well. So that's why I wanted it to be all as consistent as possible so that it's very actionable. Like I don't tell them, oh, maybe in a week we could pay. I could tell you exactly when we could pay. So that has been helpful, especially when it comes to payroll, because people rely on that. So they know exactly when payroll should come in, right? And if you miss out on that, and if everything is an estimate, that's going to be difficult for people who rely on that. Yeah, so many times it has saved us a lot of future pain. So I usually, when I look at my cash planning, I'm like always talking to my past self, like, past Reese, thank you so much for doing this. Because it's it's private conversation between myself and myself. So I'm allowed to praise myself sometimes, especially when it comes to cash flow, because it's just, sometimes it gets stressful. So it's good to always be prepared.
Absolutely. And I think what you just underscored in the examples you gave, Reese, it's like that's a really helpful component, is that using a tool like this to really be able to track the specifics of your cash flow can really help with your credibility and relationship with your different stakeholders, right? Because whether you're talking about your own staff, whether you're talking about vendors, whether you're talking about other kinds of partners, if you are able to make this a daily habit, make this a regular habit, and aim for that consistency, then you can communicate clearly and transparently about what to expect, about why you need certain things when you need them, and it's going to make it easier for you to see what's happening in the short term or even to the medium term, to plan ahead and communicate that in a timely fashion. And I think that that goes a long way when you know ahead of time. Like you said, you're not telling your staff, oh, maybe I'll pay you next week. You're saying, we're going to be 1 day late, and we want you to know that as soon as possible. I mean, that I think goes a long way to building and maintaining trust with everybody that you're working with in your social ventures.
Yeah, I think so. That was really well wrapped up, Jessie. It's so good.
That's what you keep me around for. To synthesize.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you, Reese, for sharing your knowledge, for breaking things down into really clear guidelines and kind of rules and principles, and for creating that cash flow planning template as well, and making that a resource available to others. This has been really helpful, and I want to thank others for joining and for pitching in your contributions as well. And it looks like, so Reese has just shared the link to the spreadsheet. Thank you. And as soon as we get the recording up online as well, we will share it with everybody who has joined us today, so that you have both the recording and the spreadsheet and Reese's presentation as a reference in the future. So thank you again, Reese. We really appreciate you taking the time to share with the community.
Thanks so much as well. I hope it helps.
Thank you, Reese.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks, Eddie.